All right. Welcome to Unify System Administration Training. This is session 1. And just to give you an outline of this course that we'll be doing over the next few weeks, this first session to give the whole thing with system administration training is to help you maintain and also configure your deployment of Unify. So as a system administrator, you've got access to the configuration settings in Unify. So we're going to be playing around in those over these sessions and getting our fingers into all the stuff we can change to shape a Unify deployment to meet the needs that you have in your organization or on your project. So we've grouped all of this into 3 sessions. The first one today, we're looking at project governance and user management. Next week, we're going to be looking at project metadata, categories and workflows. So that's all about how you can categorize your data and then have it aggregate for reporting and create workflows from it. And then the final one is templates, which is specific to document templates, which allow you to create controlled documents within Unify and have Unify populate those documents with the information that's required. So for today, what we're going to be covering is, basically where to find all the configuration settings in Unify and, what you can change, a bit of an overview of that. Creating users, giving users different access levels and looking at how access levels work, looking at the user role matrix, how we can use that to control access to projects, and how we can use that to control access to documents. And then we'll also look a little bit at authorized roles and doing bulk uploads of resources into the system as well. So let's go back to here and look at configuration essentials.
So does this module here enable us to link into SAP, the configuration, or is that another topic altogether?
Yeah, so accounting integration is a separate thing because accounting integrations will be unique to each deployment of Unify.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, it's a good question. Because it is involved in system administration, absolutely, but they are unique to each deployment of Unify. However, we will be looking at some things within this that will relate to configuration you may have to do to align Unify with a financial system. Now, for some users, if you're using an out-of-the-box, when I say an out-of-the-box financial integration, which is, with MYOB or Xero or Reckon, one of those sort of, off-the-shelf financial systems, there's some consistencies over that, but they're also different from one to the next. So the generally any training around accounting integrations we do specifically with you.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's out of the scope of this training session, but I will, when we go through stuff, point out things that may have an impact on a financial integration.
Okay.
Just to sort of weave it in a little bit. So when you have administrator access to Unify, what you get what I call godlike powers within Unify. And this training session is designed to teach you to use those powers responsibly, use them for good instead of evil. So like all other users of Unify, well, not like all, we'll actually see this today because we're going to play around with this. So you've got access to the modules across the top of the screen. We've got the filters in the blue band here. And if I click on this, we have the portfolio filters. And actually in the next session, we're going to look at how we create these. So I mentioned project metadata. This is part of your project metadata, and these can be configured to meet your needs. And we'll look at how we do that in the next session. But you get extra buttons in various places. So there's extra buttons available here to change this view that regular users don't get. You can also edit any project as a system administrator, and we'll see the difference when we log in as different types of users. That, you know, this button here means that I can update the lifecycle phases for any of these projects in this list. So I click on that and it gives me the lifecycle phase update. And, you know, if I didn't have system administrator access, I wouldn't have that ability to do that. The other thing you get to is up in the top left in the menu, or the hamburger as we refer to it. First of all, it tells you there you're an administrator. And then in addition to the regular modules, reporting and methodology, you get access to configuration, apps, and API. So I'll just click on the API first just to show you this. So if you're doing any kind of system integration or work with Power BI, the API is your friend, and you can play around with this to discover what sort of data you can get out of Unify. It's not within the scope of this session or this training, for that matter of fact, but if you'll follow our online videos in using Power BI, you may want to come back and reference this. So I just thought I'd point out that's where it lives. The apps relate to setting up Dropbox and Power BI integration, and we usually set those up for you, but you know, we use the integration, we use these ourselves to help set up your deployment of Unify. So I won't go into the gory details of those, but that's what they're doing. The main thing we're going to look at through these sessions is this configuration menu. And you can see there's a whole range of stuff within this to look at. And each one of those relates to a different piece of functionality within Unify. Some of them relate directly to the modules of Unify. So I can go to the contracts configuration, and I am configuring information that relates directly to the contracts module in Unify. So I can amend the contract statuses, set permissions on contracts, set variation categories and custom fields, and so on. Some of them relate to things that are used throughout different modules of Unify and help us integrate these modules. One example of that is the chart of accounts. So the chart of accounts are your cost and revenue structures within Unify. And circling back around to the financial integration, you'll see some of these are flagged as being internal. So there's different types of them. The internal ones, with their internal cost or internal revenue, if you have an accounting integration within Unify, the ones flagged as being internal here will be the ones that connect with your accounting integration. Okay. The idea of a project cost one is if you're managing a cost on behalf of someone else, you don't want that hitting your accounting integration. So you can be managing your own costs in Unify and your own revenue, and you can be managing costs on behalf of someone else. So you may want to have them separated. If your deployment of Unify is just used internally in your organization, you'll probably only have two of these, one for internal cost and one for internal revenue. And if I just drill into one of these, what we've got is a code structure. And this may or may not reflect what's happening in your financial system. So with some financial systems, this has to match code for code, what's in the financial system. With other financial systems, we go to more detail in the codes in Unify because you need more information and more detail to be able to manage your budgets and your costs in your projects in Unify, and you need more detail in Unify and less detail in the financial system. So we're able to do a mapping in the configuration between the two systems and supply the financial system with the information it needs and have the more detailed information in Unify and still be able to manage all of that. So it's not necessarily one-for-one what's in your financial system, but it often is, because that's the simplest way to achieve that. So these are managed and edited and set up through this interface.
Okay.
And yeah, so something a chart of accounts. So they're using, the revenue module, the cost module, the contracts module in reporting. They're used, across the board with things. Likewise, currency rates, if you're setting things with currency rates, and setting financial years, so setting up your financial years, closing periods, doing all of that sort of maintenance that you would do, that's all handled through here as well. So we're going to be touching on a lot of these throughout these 3 sessions, not quite exactly every single one, but if, as we go through this, you have any, specific questions about any of these, feel free to sing out. I'm more than happy to sort of delve in and have a look at some of these. What we want to do first is play around with creating users. And that's not done through the configuration menu. That is done through the resources. So as you can see here, we've got the list of, this is the list of people who have registered for our training over the last couple of years, here with administrator access. And what you'll have here is the ability to create a resource. So what I want you to do, and I'll just show you how this works. So I've just opened a second browser. So my regular browser is Firefox, and I'm logged into this deployment of Unify in Firefox. If I just copy the URL here, and I'm pasting it into Chrome, so I can be logged in as a totally different a person or a totally different user in Chrome. And if I log in, it's going to, interestingly here, give me this view of the world. So what I'm looking at here is I've logged in as a team member level license here, and it's telling me that this team member level license doesn't have access to anything. So I click on timesheets and resources and risks, and there's not any access to anything, which is interesting. It means we haven't allocated this user access anywhere, which we'll do. So what we'll do first is we'll create a couple of users. So we're going to create a team member level user and a project manager level user. Now, to do this, if you've done one of our other training sessions before and you've had a project of your own, I want you to select that project and we'll create the user directly in that project. So we'll create the user and allocate them to that project as we create them. Now, you don't have to do this. You can create them and then allocate them. But in this case, we just want to throw them on this project for the sake of it. You can pick any project in the system. It doesn't really matter which one. So I've gone into this project and I'm going to select Create Resource. And I need to give this resource a name. So we're going to make one up. And when I do this, just to remind myself that this is a team member license, I just give them the surname member and a name starting with T. So I'm going to give this person a team member license. and their login. I'm going to do just as a shortened version. So normally, if you're setting up users within your organization, we recommend that you just put in their email address as their login. In 90% of situations, that's the best thing to do. I don't want to do that here because I'm going to be using my own email address to get sent this, and my email address is already a login within this system. So so what this is going to do is create a login that's going to come through into my email. And I'm going to assign this person to the Optimum Gallifrey organization in Sydney. And obviously, you know, I can put in phone numbers and all the rest of it. But the main thing is to create a person, give them a team member license, give them a login, and have the email address be your own email address, so you receive this notification of this login, so you can log in as this person. So that's the first one I'm going to do. So I hit save on that one. And then we'll see here that the person should be assigned. Be interesting if they're not. Interesting that I didn't assign them. Wonder whether that's because there's no default role, which we will come to. Yeah, that shouldn't be the default role. Yes. Okay. That's why that didn't happen. Interesting. So when I created that resource didn't get added to the project. And I will show you why that was the case when we get to roles a bit later on. So I created Talia member there, and I'm going to create my project manager level license now. So once again, I do create resource. Again, I do the similar thing here to remind myself what of the login, and assign them to an organization. There we are. So I'm not assigning this person a rate or anything like that. We can look at that a little later. But I am assigning them to an organization. So I'm doing the fictitious organization within this, but in your unified deployment, that will be your organization. So we hit save there, and this time, because I amended the settings, I do have Pamela in here as with team member access to this particular project. So what I have received now are 2 emails confirming these access to Unify with these usernames. So I'll just give you a moment to catch up and have a go at doing that. And then I'll log in as these users and we'll see what we can see. And then we'll play around with their access to see how it changes. So I've clicked on the link here for one of those users, and it's taken me into Unify to set a password for them. So this is what happens when you set up a user. They have to set their own password based on that link. And then they are logged in. So in this case here, if I want to see who I'm logged in as, I just click on the menu and I can see here I'm logged in with this team member access. And then over here, I'm logged in as the project manager level access. So let's have a look first at the team member level access. So when I did it before, I logged into someone, I got told, you know, denied, you're not assigned to anything. But this particular team member gets a little bit more. So team members get access to 6 of the modules. The summary module, and all they can see in the summary module is the project that they're assigned to and tasks on that project. So there we are. There's all the tasks on that project, but they can't do anything with those unless they are actually assigned to them. So, you know, if I try and drill in and look at this particular one here, you know, they can come in here and add a comment. So they can collaborate around issues. But we can control the, you know, what they can see to a certain extent. So in the documents module, they can see some documents that have been created, and we will look at shortly how we can control what they can see. Issues module I clicked into already, so I can see any open issues. But as you can see, they can add a new issue. But once they've added that issue, they can add actions and comments and collaborate in the issue, but they can't edit the issue itself, and they can't close the issue. They can only set it to be awaiting review. So it's up to the project manager to be able to close the issue. They've got similar access within risks if you're using that. Within resources, they can see who's assigned to the project team and see contact details, but they can't edit any of it. And then in timesheets, they can do their timesheet. So that, but in this case, they don't have any tasks assigned to them. So there's nothing that this particular person can do in their timesheet. So that's the team member level of access. So let's compare this to the project manager level access. So you can see here, the project manager has more of the modules. In fact, the project manager has all the modules, but when we go into the menu, they've only got modules and methodology. They don't have access to reporting or configuration or any of the other ones. Now, we didn't expect them to have access to configuration, but they don't have access to reports because the thing that's distinguishing about the project manager level license is that the project manager, whilst they have access to all the modules, only has access to the data for the projects that they're assigned to. So they can only see a small piece of the portfolio. Now we're going to look at what they can edit in a moment. But if I back in here, if I go into Pamela Manager was the one, here we go, into Pamela's profile and change Pamela's profile to a program manager. So this is the license we haven't talked about yet. And this is basically your standard Unify license of a program manager, and save that and then go back in here and I'll just refresh this. You'll see a bunch of things just changed here. First of all, this My Portfolio chip displayed on here. And in the drop down, Pamela's a program manager. I'll just do a force refresh. Hey, might have to log out and log back in again as I didn't need to do any of that. So at the moment, we've got this My Portfolio chip here, and Pamela can only see the projects in her portfolio. If I remove that, I can now see the whole portfolio. Now, that's not something that the project manager level license had, but the program manager level license does have that. So that's how the views within the system change as we give access levels to users, and how their view can change if you change their level of access. Any sort of specific questions on that? We're going to delve into this a little bit deeper because there's a whole nother level to this, which is the role they're assigned to. But I just wanted to show you that, the system looks different depending on the level of license that you have.
No, all fine with me.
Cool. All right. Now, I'm just going to go back into the PowerPoint. And there's a particular, what I wanted to show you was this, which is the governance matrix for Unify. So on the left, we have the license level that you're assigned to in your user profile. So we're all in this training assigned as administrators. We just created 2 profiles, one as team member and one as project manager. And then to play around with it, we upped our project manager to a program manager level role. And then we can see the levels of access to things is progressive for these license levels based on the role that they have in addition to the license that they have. Now, this doesn't apply to system administrators. System administrators, as you can see across the top, have got full editing rights to everything. Program managers, however, only get editing rights when they are assigned in an appropriate role. We're going to look at this. We're going to look at these roles in a second, but the roles have access levels as well. So for instance, I might, if I have, or if we take the example of the user I just created of Pamela, manager, Pamela might be assigned as a project director. And that project director could have a role of, program manager level role. Now that, if we say she has a program manager level license and a program manager level role, that gives her editing rights on this project. So that's how this matrix works. But if I'm in a program manager level role with no access to the project, then it's only viewing rights. And then the rights increase as the access level for the role increases as well. So you've got these 2 levels to give people fine-grained levels of access within a project. So you might have a program manager level license, but a project team member level, a team member level project role, which only gives you limited editing capabilities on that particular project. So we can come back to this screen if you're still thinking about this and processing this, but we're going to experiment around with this with one of the user licenses that we just created. So what we're going to do first is go into the configuration and go to roles. So we can see here are roles that so these are roles on our project. So these are different from, your role or your position in your organization. This is the role you have on a project. And each role has an access level. Now, it's also, we've got these two other ones here, which is default and mandatory. I'll explain those in a moment. So the access level goes back to that matrix of controlling all of this stuff over here when we assign people into those roles. So I took my example for a project director. Project director has program manager level access on a project. Now this is twofold. This means you can only be put in the role of project director if you have that level of access on the project. So to demonstrate that, I've got this open twice. I'll go into the resources module, into my project, and I go down to Thalia member, who is my team member level license. And this column here is the role that people are assigned to on the project. And when I click on this, these are the roles that are available to Thalia. And as you can see, there's a whole bunch of them, but project director is not there because Thalia does not have the right level of access to be put in the role of project director. So none of these program manager or project manager level roles show up for Thalia. Only the team member level roles do, and the roles that don't have any access, because you can be put in a role that doesn't have any access to the project as well. So that's the, and if we go back to here, so if I'm a team member, I have a team member level license, but someone assigns me in a project role that doesn't have any level of access to it, I don't get any access to that project. I can't even see that project. Likewise, as a project manager, if I'm in a role with no access, I get no access as well. So you need to understand what the roles are doing, because you may inadvertently put someone in a role that doesn't give them access to a project. So that's what that none is. Now, those still have use because you will have contacts in Unify in your resources that don't have access, and you assign them in a role. The role doesn't need access. They don't have access. There's, and that's what these roles are typically used for. Or you may want to have someone linked to a project just for the purposes of you tracking correspondence, or the project tracking correspondence without giving them direct access to the project, which these roles give you as well. So let's create a role. So to do that, we click on add and we give the role a name. This is a very important role. There we are. Description of the role to help users. So most of the users in the system can see, what these role descriptions mean, which help people understand what the roles are used for. And then we have the access level, right? So I am going to make this a project manager level access. And then I've got two options here. One is default and one is mandatory. So the default role is used when we are adding people to a project, either by creating them as I did before, or sometimes we add them through an integration. For some reason, we add a contact to them. If Unify is needing to put people into a project role automatically, so Unify is automatically assigning them to the project, it will pick one of the default roles that aligns with their license level. So typically you only need one, and typically you make it a team member level role. So as I've done here, make this team member one the default role. And so that means that anyone I add automatically to a project will go into the role of team member, and then I can adjust what their level of access is to the appropriate role after that. Mandatory is different. Mandatory is a way of saying, having a business rule in your organization that every single project must have someone assigned in this role. And then there are some KPIs in Unify that look at this and can give you a red or an amber green flag to say that you don't have the right people assigned within your project. So it may be a business rule in your organization. Every project must have a project manager and a project director. And this is just a way to have Unify to help show you that this is happening through the KPIs. So I'd like to say that the person who hands out the donuts at morning tea is a mandatory role, but let's face it, it's neither the default role or a mandatory role. So I'm just going to hit save to create that role. So have a go at creating a role. It could be project manager, administrator role, program manager role, whatever you want it to be. Have some fun with naming it. And then we'll have a go at using this role. So now I can come back. I'm back in my project in the resources module, looking at the project team, and I can go back down to, who was it? Pamela here. And I can change Pamela's role to the project donut distributor, the role I just created. And I mean, she's there as a team member as well. You know, I can remove that or you can leave it there. It doesn't really matter for the purposes of this. And you see who I'm logged in as Talia here. I want the other one where I'm logged in as Pamela. So I can go into that project now as Pamela. And I've now got editing rights to the project. So just to reiterate, I'm logged in to this in this browser as Pamela, who has program manager level access. Pamela's been given a project manager level role on this project. And as you can see, I can edit this project. So I can, update the sector and the project type, all of this stuff, all this project editing thing. I can go to the contracts module and add contracts and edit these contracts that exist. I've got full editing rights to this project. Not quite full. Is that loading? What's happening? So, not quite full, it would seem. Now, this is interesting because there are other things that control levels of access. We looked at the chart of accounts before. You'll see here with the chart of accounts, there's minimum access levels, right? So we have some chart of accounts, like the revenue chart of accounts, that requires program manager level access. So when I go into the revenue module as Pamela, I can see this because Pamela has program manager level access, but in editing rights on the project, Pamela only has project manager level access. And this contract here, this services engineering contract, is linked to that revenue. No, it's loading this time. Let me give a better example. What I will do is I will now change Pamela's access back to Project Manager. So let's go into here. And let's pull Pamela's access back to Project Manager. And then we'll refresh this. Right, here we go. So Pamela has Project Manager level access to this project. So here we are, we can edit the project, but we can't edit everything. I go to the revenue module, there's no information. I go to the cost module and there's no information. I go back logged in as myself. And go to the revenue module. And I can see the revenue data here. And I go into the contract and I can see the contract. And when I drill into this contract and look at the details for this contract, I can see that this contract is linked to these revenue codes. And here in configuration and chart of accounts, I can see that this one is linked to Program Manager level access. So by restricting Pamela to Project Manager level access, we are allowing Pamela to have editing rights to the project, but not editing rights to anything that relates to our internal revenue. So the use case for this is if you have someone who's an external person, maybe an external consultant that you're hiring in, and you want them to help you manage cost, but you don't want them to see anything to do with your revenue, you can give them a Project Manager level license and still manage all the revenue yourself through Unify, but not let them see that information. You can even limit some of the cost information that they can see. So you can have certain chart of accounts that handle costs that are limited to Program Manager level licenses, and some that have access to Project Manager level licenses. So you can get quite sophisticated with all this access here. So if I then change again Pamela's access, go back to the resources, go into Pamela's profile, change Pamela's access back to Program Manager. And then additionally, on the project, change Pamela into a project manager role. So this project manager role is a Program Manager level access role. I'll just confirm that by going into the roles. So Project Manager is a Program Manager level role. So we've now given Pamela full access to everything. So if I click on revenue, suddenly Pamela has access and can see all the revenue information, and in the contracts can now see these contracts and can drill in and edit these contracts, which are linked to the revenue chart of accounts. So just bringing it back to this, that's how this sort of stepped levels of access can work. And it's particularly focused around financial information. The idea is that as a program manager, you have access to all financial information, but you can only edit it where it's your project and you're in an appropriate role. When you are a project manager, yes, you have project editing rights, but those editing rights don't extend to all parts of the system if it's configured to restrict you away from some financial information. And as a team member, you don't even see any of that financial information. So just to reiterate that, if I'm logged in as, here I am logged in as Talia, the team member, I've got access to documents, issues, risks, resources, timesheets. I can't see revenue and costs and contracts. So the only way I can see anything to do with that is if we create a document with this data in it. So you'll see here, this one has a consulting contract created, and Talia has access to that. And when I go into that, there is revenue information that's been and contract information that's been populated into a document out of the contracts module when we issued the consulting contract on this particular project. Now, if I go into my access on this one, make sure it is my access. Here we go. I go to documents and we'll see we've got 4 documents here. Now, 3 of them are private. Now, if I change some of these to other statuses, like open for review, helps if I save those statuses. We can then see whether this makes any of these visible to our team member. And look, it's made some of them visible, but not all of them. So for instance, the invoice here is visible. It's blank. Obviously, I didn't do a full invoice. And the consulting contract is visible. However, there was an additional one that I had, which is a contract agreement, and that's not visible to them. So the next extra level that we have is access to particular documents. So when I go into configuration and templates, now the 3rd session we're going to be doing is going to be looking at this in a lot more detail. And let me just look at this budget status template here. So I click on the edit button to edit it. There's 2 things here. Well, there's actually 3 things that will control user access to the template. The first one is this document edit roles, right? So here are the levels. There are the roles assigned to those levels. And if I check the box with anything here, it will limit editing of this document to people within those roles at that access level. Now that's very, very restrictive, and that's usually only done in highly specific situations where you only want people in certain roles creating certain documents. There's a much broader one here, which is this minimum access required to view documents. So this document here of the budget status is limited to project manager level access. Now I can reduce that to team member or increase it to program manager. And the idea with this is you want to give everyone access to documents for the purposes of collaboration, but you may not want them to see all the information that ends up in documents. You may have, revenue information, other sensitive financial information, budgets, and so on that end up in documents that you don't want every single person seeing. And this allows you to basically filter that based on the access level they have. So if you know that you're only giving access to people outside of your organization to collaborate, to maybe team member or sometimes project manager level access, anything that's internal and sensitive to you internally, you can set the document to program manager, and those documents will not be visible to the people on those license levels. And then the third thing that determines that is sign-offs, which is role-based. So as you create a document that goes to a particular person for their sign-off, that will flow through and trigger a sign-off for them. So let's have a go at that one. So what I'm going to do here on this is create a new document, and I am going to use that budget status one just to do one quickly. And you can see here are all the roles that are required. Now, when we do the template training in 2 weeks' time, we're going to look at creating these documents in detail. So I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly here, because what I'm trying to show you is the way that the roles direct the sign-offs to people. So we can see here that Pamela is going to be one of the people who needs to sign off this document. So we're going to have a look at what that looks like. So I'll just create that. We'll pick, yeah, we're going to status. Obviously, we've never set up a budget on this particular project. I might change the project to one I know has a budget. Does this one have a budget? No. Here we go. So I'll just put Pamela into the project manager level role on this particular project to demonstrate this. And we'll create the budget status document. So there we are. I can see this is going to go to Pamela for sign off, amongst others. There we are. There's the budget. That'll do. I'm not too worried about the content of this particular document. I'm just putting it to awaiting sign off. So that has now gone into the world of needing to be signed off. So I'm back in here in this deployment where I'm logged in as Pamela, and I'm in this My Portfolio view here. And I can see here are my 2 projects that I'm assigned to. And I've got in the summary module, I've got this sign off here. And this shows me all the documents that are awaiting sign off for me that have been workflowed to me based on the roles that I have on the project. So there's that budget status document that I just created that is now workflowed to Pamela for sign off. What it's also telling Pamela is that this requires 3 signatures, right? So if I'm say the project director, and I know I'm going to be the last person to sign it off, I may look at that and go, I'm only going to look at that when that says 1. But Pamela is not in that role. She's down the chain. So Pamela can open this document, look at it, review the information, and here we are. We can see who needs to sign it off. And Pamela clicks on add signature, and there we are. That's now been signed off by Pamela. Close that, and that drops off the sign off thing. So that was all based on the roles. So, but you can only go in the roles when you have an access level. So that's a little bit of, as we're going to be doing more workflows and more documents and templates in the next couple of sessions, but I just wanted to demonstrate that to you to tie it in what we're talking about here with roles. So if I then select the project, go back to the resources, and there's Pamela in the role of project manager, and that's what workflowed that document to her for sign off based on the way that document, that template, the document was based on was configured. So where are we up to now? So authorized roles. Okay. So there's further levels of nuance that you can add to this. So if I go into the resources module here, and I'm going to just right click and open Pamela's profile in a new tab. And you'll see here, here's Pamela's profile. We've assigned Pamela's license. We've come in here a couple of times and changed this license. One thing I'm going to do now, I'm going to attempt to drop Pamela's license down to team member. I do this and I get, before changing their license, this user must first be removed from the following roles. Project manager, right? So Unify is telling me Pamela is assigned in this role. Team member level access is too low for those roles. We need to change those roles first before we can drop Pamela back to that level. Now, we can do this quickly and easily because within Pamela's profile, we can go to projects and see the projects that Pamela is assigned to, right? And I can change Pamela's access here. We can say, yes, remove project manager, make only team member. There we are. And now I can go back to here and change Pamela to a team member. And that's brought Pamela's access right back. Now, I'm going to up it again to program manager because I want more stuff to play with. Also within this projects here, you can use this to add people into projects in bulk. So, you know, with here, there's also, actually, before we do that, there's that edit button, right? When I click edit, I get all of the projects in the system that are open and all the roles. And I can add Pamela in to any of these roles into every project if necessary. So I could click that there and that would put this user in as a team member on every single project. Now, I may not want to put them on every single project. You may want to, there may be a good reason for doing that. So I can actually use the portfolio filters and say, what I want to do is assign them onto every project in the commercial sector. Yep, I know that's not saved, that's okay. So I can apply this filter here, and I'm now only looking at the projects in the commercial sector. Of which there's quite a number. Yep. And I can add Pamela as a team member to all of those projects in one hit. There we are, that's done. So Pamela is now assigned to every project in the commercial sector within this deployment of Unify in one go. Now, I click on this and I get some other options here. Remove and replace. So I can remove Pamela from all of these projects in one go. And I can replace Pamela with someone else. So remove is, you know, fairly straightforward, but if I say replace and pick Trudy Ember into the role of team member there. And there we are. Pamela is no longer assigned to anything. If I go back to the dashboard here and search for Trudy and go to Trudy's projects, there we are. Trudy is assigned to everything. So if you have people who have particular roles within the organization and they're going on leave and someone is subbing in for them, you can quickly swap people in and out of roles to do this. Just going to go back into Pamela's profile. Now, in addition to that, sorry, just one moment. So a further level of control you have is here with authorized roles. So we saw before that things could be routed to people for sign off based on the roles that they have. In some organizations where Unify is being used to process payments on contracts and to award contracts and to change budgets, what we're doing here is providing the authorization for then money to change hands. And there are delegations assigned with this, and you don't want someone putting themselves in the role of, CFO and signing off on $1 million transactions that they're not authorized to. So as the system administrator, what you're able to do is, in addition to giving someone their license level and assigning them into an appropriate role on the project, you can restrict what roles they can go in. Now, this is very restrictive. So I only recommend using this where there is the need for this in your organization. And that, I would say, would apply where Unify is being used for delegated approvals. So, I may have the delegation to sign off transactions up to, $20,000, and above that, I need to be in a different role in order to do that, but I'm not allowed to be in that role. So I have to be restricted to the roles that have my level of delegation. So to do that, the default for everyone is to not have this turned on. And that means you can be assigned, or this person can be assigned into any of these roles based on the level of access they have to the system, based on their license level. But if I come in here and say, okay, we can only have these as the authorized roles for Pamela, then what this tells me is, A, here are the roles that Pamela is in, but also here are the delegations that are going to apply. So this is telling me, based on the delegations that are set in the document templates, which we will be looking at in session 3 on how we set these up, Pamela is going to be able to sign off variations to the value of 10 grand in some circumstances based on these roles. And if I, add a few more, no, they're the only ones. So as the system administrator here, I can review what delegations people are being given, where the financial delegations are being set, and I can change and update them accordingly. So now, if I go back to the dashboard and back to Clive World Enterprises, worldwide headquarters here, we've removed Pamela from this project and we added Trudy. So Trudy was a team member level license, and they're all the, maybe Trudy's no level of access. I'm not sure. Let's have a look. Yeah, access level none. There we go. But so if I'm adding Pamela back onto this project, I only get the roles that Pamela has been authorized to be in. So she's authorized to be the donut distributor, so we can put her back on this project as the donut distributor. Now, again, I wouldn't just implement this in your organization unless there was a strong reason. And the main reason for doing it is, as we looked at here within Pamela's profile, to understand and see within the system what level of authorization people are allowed to sign off on things from a financial point of view. So this is budgets, commitments, so contracts or purchase orders, variations, and payments, and invoicing as well, for that matter. So if you have delegations in your organization and you're spending your organization's money through Unify, you can set these up accordingly and manage these as part of your overall user management. Okay, so one more thing I want to show you in this session, and that is getting data into Unify in bulk. So again, because today's session is focused on user management, we're going to be looking at adding the contact details for users into Unify. Now, the easiest way for me to get some data is to run a report out of Unify. So I'm gone into the menu, gone to reports and reporting. I'm going to go to project reports and run the contact list. And I'm going to run this to Excel. This is going to give me a bunch of data, and we'll see what we've got here. Okay, so I've got a bunch of contact data in Excel, which is nice. When you set up your Unify deployment or at various points, you may have big data sets like this that you need to get in. And Unify has a series of interfaces for pasting this data in, either to update it or to add it into the system. And we're going to look at some other ones for this in some of the other sessions, but this is doing it for resources. So basically I've got a whole lot of resources here. It's in Excel. I can just select all of that information, do Control-C, go into Unify, go to the resources module, and there's an import button here. And I hit import, and I do import contacts, and I get this thing that says paste Excel data here. I do Control-V, and what this gives me is an interface to map this data and to update data when it matches the data in Unify. So I've got to work through this and map it to the Unify data. So here, within here is a drop-down list that relates to all the data that's in Unify for resources. This includes resource custom fields, which we'll look at setting up next week. So this first field here is my contact name. Now, you'll notice here there's also a contact ID. You know, matching and updating on a contact ID can be a lot more robust than matching on a contact name, but we'll do contact name. Then we've got the organization name, organization ABN, contact position, contact email, and some address details, you know, site address, and so on. So this is a whole lot of data within here. And you can see here, I've got these ticks down the side of it. So, you know, if there were particular ones I didn't want to import, again, I can untick them and it won't import them. Now, I'm not going to add these in because these are already in the system, and I don't want to sort of, you know, add any duplicates, and there are already duplicates within this, so not going to get too excited by it. But basically, we've mapped this to the fields in Unify, and Unify can take this Excel data and suck it up and create all of these resources. And that will basically give us what we've got here, which is all of these resources set up within the system. So we can pull that in straight from Excel quickly and easily, which is very useful when you're setting up a new deployment of Unify, or you've got a new project and you're handed a contact list for that project. You can basically suck it up within that. We can also, to circle back around to the subject of accounting integrations, we can, with some accounting integrations, we do pull this data through from the financial system. So there may be supplier information or client information in the financial system, and we can pull that through into Unify such that you don't have to create those contacts in Unify. We can also use Unify as the source of truth for that data. So if you amend it, Unify can update the other system. So you're not having to maintain data in two places, which is always the advantage of a integration to avoid that. Just a couple of other things I'll point out here in terms of user management. There's also user management of rates. So if you're wanting to know when resources timesheet to your projects, what they cost and what their potential charge out rate is, that can be set up for every user within the system. So there's a couple of levels to this. So in configuration, under we've looked at roles, but there's also resources configuration here. And I'm just going to give you a brief overview of this. The first thing you're able to do is set a bunch of rate classifications. So these are the ones that have been set up within this system. So you can have codes for them, the description of the classification, and then the classification can have a standard charge rate and a standard cost rate. So the charge rate is what you would use to help build up an estimate and to potentially, have a rate that you charge the client. The cost rate is the cost of that person working on that project for you per hour. We can also create rate multipliers. So you can have a series of rate multipliers that you set up that can look at underlying base rates, and then a charge and a cost multiplier to that. You can even set up employment types to assign to people as well. And all of these things can be combined to set a rate for a particular person. So if I search for a particular person here, gone into Clara's profile and gone to Clara's rate history. So I can see Clara's had rates going all the way back to 2013. Interestingly, there's a blank rate there, so I'm going to fill that in. And Clara's rate hasn't changed in all that time, so we mustn't have given her a pay rise. So we've got this history of back through time of these rates. And for the current rate, the most recent one here, we can see that this rate has been set per classification. So, Clara is classified as an E4 junior engineer, and that is determining both the charge rate and the cost rate. Now, let's say that we just, as of the beginning of November, have changed her classification and given her a raise and a promotion to be an E3 engineer rather than a junior engineer. So what I'm doing here is we can build up a rate based on a whole lot of information here, including salaries. So salaries and multipliers can create charge rates and cost rates, but in this case, I'm setting it per classification. So that is going to pull these rates from this classification. So when I hit save, that is now changing Clara's rate as of the 1st of November, underlying cost rate of $120 and a charge rate of $150. Now, in addition, I can update those in bulk. So if I go into configuration and resources, and let's say effective from Monday the 15th, all of these rates are going to increase ever so slightly. I'm just going to add, $10 onto each of them. And only the charge rate, not the underlying cost rate for some reason. I don't have a clear reason, but we can always make one up. There we are. So these are the new charge rates that are going to apply from the 15th of November. So when I hit save now, this will have applied those to everyone in the system. So I go back into resources, find Clara again, look at Clara's rate history, and we'll see, there we are, 1st of November, we updated her to be an E3 engineer, and those were the rates that applied. But system-wide from the 15th of November, we have now applied this new charge rate, and that's what will apply as of that date. So in addition to managing resources, we can manage the rates that apply to these resources. Now, this was just a very quick introduction to this. We talk about rates and the way they're used more in the project controls training that we do. And we also have lots of very specific use cases for all of these. Every column that's in this was put in because there was the need for it in a particular situation within Unify to create and manage rates and, rates by multipliers and employment types and underlying salaries and escalation and all of this stuff. There's a lot we can do with this that feeds into part of the user management. So I just wanted to sort of give a brief introduction to that, but it's a, and then this is then used throughout the system. In addition to this, there can be additional business rules that are put in place, which I won't go into now, but you may only be able to charge certain rates to a client, and there's things that we can help out with there to help manage the way rates work within the system. If there are specific business rules that apply to your project or your organization. So let's have a look at our PowerPoint. There we go. We've covered everything for today, which is always a relief. And next week, we're going to be looking at project metadata and workflows. So we'll move off users and into configuring the system more broadly. So thanks everyone for today, and